Every winter, the Tennessee Valley Authority draws Kentucky Lake down about 5 feet, and every winter, out past Birmingham Point, the mud gives something back. Foundations. The lines of old streets, the footprint of a town. It was called Birmingham, Kentucky, named, with a straight face, for the Iron City in England. For 90 years it sat on the west bank of the Tennessee River in Marshall County, and for a while it was busier than the county seat. Today there is nothing above the water but a name on a map, and, for a few weeks each winter, its bones. Welcome back to Dark History of the Jackson Purchase. Today, the drowning of Birmingham, the biggest dam the TVA ever built, the 2,600 families in its way, and what it costs to move a river. A story that rarely gets told plainly. Birmingham was settled in 1849 and platted 4 years later. It was a steamboat landing with ambition, a stave mill that employed 200 men, 5 churches, 2 hotels, a bank. In 1874, it had twice the population of Benton, the county seat. The founders named it for Birmingham, England, because the hills across the river were full of iron, and they meant to build a city. The iron money never quite came. But the town held on, 355 people at its peak, living off the river that would one day take everything. Twice in 50 years, Birmingham was emptied of its people. The first time was an angry mob of night riders who drove every black resident out of town by deadly force. The second time was the government, which decided an entire river had to be tamed, and this town was standing in the water's way. That first story is a dark one, and one for another day. Today is about the water. To understand why Birmingham had to die, you have to understand the Tennessee River as it actually was. Not the flat blue recreation lake on the postcards, but a wild, dangerous, poor man's river. It flooded almost every spring, and when it flooded, it took houses, livestock, whole bottom farms. Its slack backwaters bred malaria that touched as much as a third of the valley. It ran too shallow, too much of the year, for the barges that could have carried a crop to market. The land along it was some of the poorest in the country, farms without electricity, families a bad season away from ruin. The New Deal's answer was not to fix one bend or one town. It was to take the whole river, in President Truman's later words, to treat it as a whole, and rebuild it from the bottom up. Dams, reservoirs, power. And the lowest, widest dam of them all would go here, near the mouth of the Tennessee, and the lake behind it would be enormous. The story local men like to tell started in a plum thicket. A journalism teacher from Murray named L.J. Horton remembered it this way. We met in an old plum thicket overlooking the Tennessee River, a handful of men sketching a dream in the dirt for their Senator Alben Barkley. A dam, the biggest one yet. In May of 1938, Congress funded it. That July, the ground broke at Gilbertsville, and the countdown began for everything upstream. At its peak, nearly 5,000 men worked on Kentucky Dam. It was one of the largest construction jobs in the country, a wall of concrete and earth more than 1.5 miles long, thrown across a river that had never been crossed like it. TVA built the workers a village on the site. Houses floated down the river from an earlier dam, a school, a hospital, a whole company town raised out of nothing. Men came off failing farms for a steady wage, and the oral histories are plain that some of them did not come home, though no official count of the dead survives in the public record. And while the men poured concrete, the government went to work on the valley behind them. Because a dam is only half the project. The other half is the water, and everything the water is about to cover. 320,000 acres, 2,609 families. Farms that had been in the same names since the 1800s. Land people's grandparents had cleared by hand, an acre at a time. The government sent appraisers, made offers, and the families who wouldn't take them were condemned in court and moved anyway. Some had a little time. Some watched from the road. The town of Old Gilbertsville was big enough that TVA rebuilt it on higher ground. Birmingham wasn't given that option. Too small, the agency judged, not worth the cost. Its bank, its churches, its stave mill, the streets where a mob had once fired into the walls. The buildings came down in 1943, and the people scattered to Benton, to Calvert City, to wherever they could carry a life. Even the dead had to move. Before the water came up, TVA lifted 3,390 graves out of the ground ahead of it, parents, children, whole family plots, and carried them to higher cemeteries, 113 of them. Birmingham's dead went to Bryansburg. Somewhere in that number are people who were born before the town existed and buried expecting to stay. On August 30th, 1944, the gates closed. The river stopped, turned, and backed up 184 miles. Birmingham, Kentucky, the landing, the mill lots, the churchyards, the empty streets, went under the largest man-made lake east of the Mississippi. 14 months later, Harry Truman stood at the dam, the only sitting president ever to set foot in Marshall County, before a crowd of 20,000, and dedicated what he called the 16th great structure built by the TVA. TVA, he said, is just plain common sense. It is common sense hitched up to modern science and good management. And here is the hard part, the part this channel won't pretend away in either direction. He was largely right about what it bought. The floods stopped. The malaria that had haunted a third of the valley was essentially gone within 3 years. Farms that had never had a light bulb got power. Industry came to Calvert City for the cheap electricity. The tourists came for the lake. And the postcards bragged, America's largest man-made lake. All of it true. And all of it cost something. 2,600 families who gave up land their people had cleared by hand, a town erased down to its foundations, and 3,000 graves that had to be dug up to get out of the way of the water. Progress with a receipt, paid mostly by people who never got a vote on the price. The people of Birmingham never entirely let go. They held reunions for decades. One organizer put it simply, I wanted people to know that Birmingham still existed. A woman who left as a girl remembered only where we lived, the church that I went to, and the school. And one man said he still takes a boat out over the spot to fish, because, he said, it feels like going home. Every winter the lake goes down, and the foundations come up, and for a few months you can stand on a shoreline in Marshall County and look at the bones of a town, a place that was here, that mattered, that held real people in their whole lives, until the country decided it needed the water more. The mud keeps all of their stories. Thanks for sitting with another story without easy heroes. Because Kentucky Dam was only the first time the government came for this corner of the map. In 1964, a photographer passing through here took a picture of a hand-painted sign nailed up by the road. It read, TVA is taking our homes, by force. They came back. For everything left between the rivers, Golden Pond, Model, every farm, every church, 900 more families. That story, The Land Between the Lakes, is next. Until then, keep your porch light on.